Welcome to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm Dan Rowe, and I've masterminded the ascent of local favorites to global dominators. This isn't your usual get-to-know-you chat. We're diving deep. We're revealing the raw truths about franchise wealth building. With over 30 years in the trenches, I'm spilling it all. If you have an appetite for unfiltered tales and the hidden blueprints of franchise prosperity, buckle up. We're diving in. All right, welcome back to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. Today we're talking with 340-unit, multi-unit, multi-brand franchisee SG Ellison with Diversified Restaurant Group about how he did it. We want to see what we can learn from a franchisee's perspective and also what a franchisor needs to do to land a franchisee like SG. Thinking both about the sales and internal cash a company at this size generates, plus the royalty revenue that goes back to a franchisor like this generates. This is the target. I mean, this is the big idea with franchising, and SG's doing it. So I'm glad we're talking. I first met SG in Pebble Beach. We were at the National Restaurant Association golf tournament. It was a Ballestery golf tournament, good fundraiser. And I think I was golfing with you and your partner, David, right?
That's right, David Grieve.
David Grieve, and he was pouring wine throughout the tournament, keeping us from golfing our best. But anyways, let's get into it. So where are you, by the way?
I am actually in a hotel in Palm Beach called The Breakers, which you probably know, maybe have been to. Funny story is I actually wrote a paper in college in an architectural class. I had an engineering degree, but I was forced to go to architectural class to get to understand why I was designing these beams. And I wrote a paper on great American hotels, and the Breakers in Palm Beach was one of them, along with the Biltmore in Phoenix. You know, the Frank Lloyd Wright one there that is really renowned. And the third one in the paper was the Hotel Del Coronado. And now I live near the Del. I grew up going to the Biltmore in Phoenix and sitting here in the Breakers. So a little bit of foreshadowing in that paper where I might be spending some time later in life.
Good. Well, you're leading the life. They filmed Heartbreakers at the Breakers Hotel. I like that. That movie.
That's a great movie.
So let's get into it. So how about a little bit about your background? It's a good segue. So how about a little bit about your background and take us up to kind of how this whole idea started, how you got to where you are now?
That's a long journey. So hopefully I'll pause and you can, maybe help with some questions there. But, I grew up in Arizona in a little copper mining town called Superior, not far from Scottsdale, maybe an hour and a half, I think, where you live. And, just grew up in this mining town. My father and grandparents were kind of in the mining business. The mine shut down. He ultimately got into other jobs, ended up getting an education degree, and joined my mom in the education industry, being teachers and counselors. My mom was a fifth grade teacher for about 35 years. My dad ended up being a phys ed teacher, ultimately a counselor, and doing a lot of good things for the community and a lot of kids. And so I ended up going to didn't go the route of education, which most of my family did. They were first kind of generation grads from school, and that's the industry they chose. I chose a little bit different path and went into engineering. Took me a little while to figure that out. I thought I wanted to be in medicine. I was really active in sports when I was a kid, so sports medicine was interesting. So I took some pre-med, but eventually sort of figured out that I like playing the sports, not so much working on the folks playing the sports. And so ended up pivoting to engineering. Didn't actually graduate college. I went a little bit later and graduated Arizona State when I was 25 with a civil engineering degree. I went there when I was about 22 and got into the engineering business. Did master plan communities in Arizona, like Tremonto and Etham, doing like sewer drainage designs and stuff like that. And ended up in a civil land development business where I was the project manager for a new retailer coming out west called CVS Drugstore. And at the time in 2001, there wasn't any CVS's west of the Mississippi. And this company that I ended up working for about a decade was based out of Pittsburgh, and they got the account to open up Phoenix. Thinking we were doing about 10 to 20 CVS drugstores. I started with that company, and through engineering, construction, entitlements, landed in the real estate role, and became kind of a full-fledged developer. And over about a decade, built a company out west of about 100 professionals in Dallas, Phoenix, and Vegas. And we built about 350 CVS drugstores and about 50 Chase banks, and started our own development company in about 2010 to start doing kind of the retail development side of the business. And that's kind of the first part of my career.
Got it. How did you, I mean, well, that goes to show you thought you were going to do 10 CVSs, you did 20 times that. Just goes to show if you do a good job, you get more, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that I've always worked in life. One of the things I've always tried to do is make others successful. Right. And I think that, as an employee, and learning that, not being growing up in a business world, but learning that, everybody has these goals that they need to hit. The real estate rep at CVS, whose name was Mark Miller, became one of my best friends in the world. He had goals of delivering, 20, 30 CVS drugstores in the market, over a 2-year period. And, I delivered 50 of them, and same thing with Greg Vogel at JP Morgan Chase. He had a goal, and we just kept over delivering because you knew that if they were successful, obviously you're going to get fees for the business, but you would get more business and you would be more successful. So I've always sort of like, whoever I'm working with, particularly if they're a client or, partners' goals or an investor's goals, like whatever they are, to kind of, set them up in my plan to exceed and beat them. And then they become your promoters. They become your best advocates. And it's the same way that I treat the 10,000 folks that work for us now. What are their goals, and how do we set them up to achieve greater goals than they set for themselves?
Yeah, I was thinking like not only do well for the people that work for you, but also like that's kind of a franchisor's job, right? The franchisor's job is to over deliver to make you happy and successful, so you want to keep growing, right? And too many franchisors don't really understand that.
Not all the time. I think, we're lucky in the brands that we're in. I mean, particularly, in Taco Bell, they just have a really amazing franchisee relationship. We've been in it for a little over a decade. And, there's always this healthy tension and what the goals are. But ultimately, the goal for both sides is to grow. They want to grow the top line. We want to grow the bottom line. They want to see our bottom lines grow. So we want to keep the top lines growing more. And for us, they have goals of net new unit growth or same store sales growth as well that they're looking to deliver to the street. If we could help them, meet those goals or exceed those goals, they become a better partner for us and help us continue to expand. So it's the same philosophy. And I think that the executive team at Taco Bell today is one of the best I've seen in completeness across the board. And over the last 10 years, we've got some great leaders. This particular leader, Sean Tresmond, he thinks sort of beyond the bell. He thinks about big brand, big strategy, and really has this amazing team behind him that executes against it and puts the franchisees in a position to go out and really grow their own businesses as well. So I really believe that it's the best relationships, and why we've grown so much in Taco Bell is because we've helped them be successful. They've seen it and they've helped us be successful.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm jumping around a little because I have some things I want to talk to you about, but this is the meat of it. This is the meat of it right here. It's like I rarely hear franchisees talk about how they want to do good things for the franchisor. It's mostly what's in it for them and them. And there's a correlation between what you're talking about and why you're as successful as you are. And then, I mean, likewise, I grew up in Orange County. I love Taco Bell. As a customer, I know a lot of franchisees. Like, it's a good franchise, like solid franchise. But it's, I mean, the way that you guys are talking about wanting to be successful and helping the franchisor to be successful, there's a lot to learn there. So
Yeah, Dan, the way I look at it is it's about making those successful, but it's if you're going to be in a brand, you want to make that brand better, and how can that brand be better, whereby you will ultimately be better. And so when we got into the brand, in 2000, I'll get into that in 2012, we started a development company called First Street Development. And now my longtime friend and partner, Brandon Stein, is the president of that. And Chris Sis worked with them. They came with me from the former company and have built a really great development company. And as we were doing that, the primary investor and partner in it was David Grieb and his friend, and now my friend Andrew Churn and Peggy Churn at Panda Express. And so we had this really great group of folks that were there to help us start our development company. And the goal was to build retail developments and build triple net locations that could help with the overall portfolio. David had founded a company in 1992 called A&C Ventures, and he built this amazing platform for triple net retail and had a few hundred retail locations across the country. And obviously Andrew and Peggy are the great American success story with Panda Express. So we were very fortunate to have a couple of really great partners from the beginning. And we identified the sale leaseback with a couple of operators out of Southern California that were leaving Taco Bell, named Brian Cox and Mark Reed, who have a great company today, but they started it with us. I was able to essentially broker a deal between them and David to help provide the equity to buy the business through the real estate vehicle, and then take kind of a portion of the equity position, because these guys couldn't sell the real estate for 2 years. GE Capital, the brand, had some handcuffs on it. And so Dave and I were convinced to go ahead and go along for the ride. He put together this great partnership and found out that this was a really good business, this operating business in Taco Bell. And being astute as he is, wanted to start and find a new company called eventually Diversified Restaurant Group to wholly own operating businesses. And that's how we got into it. And then, because we were developers and maybe a little naive from a standpoint of being a franchisee, where we maybe spent a little bit more money or tried some things a little bit differently, the brand sort of leaned into that, and we were able to help them create this Taco Bell Cantina concept, which we opened up.
Was you that helped come up with that?
Yeah, that was us. We opened the first one alongside another franchisee named Neil Borkin in Chicago. So he opened one in Chicago about a week before we opened ours in San Francisco. And the big kind of point in that was to try to provide a new sales layer and bring this sort of this alcohol and beer and wine and elevate sort of the experience that you were getting.
Drive your night, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah. And we opened up across the giant stadium, and it did really well. And the differentiator was calling it a cantina. And the brand was originally a little bit unsure about if they wanted to call it that. And we convinced them that, or together we came up that was the right thing to do to differentiate, that there was some different products in there. It worked out. A year later, we bought the Nevada market from a guy named Bill Allman, who was retiring. And the first thing we did was open up this flagship cantina on the Las Vegas Strip that is now the highest volume Taco Bell in the world. The MO was a Willy Wonka, a destination, a pilgrimage for Taco Bell fans. We built it right. They leaned in and helped. And, since then, it's been that collaboration of what can we do to help elevate the brand and make the brand better. And they've, returned in being able to help us in the franchise community look at how to expand things. So it's been a very, very, let's all grow together mentality.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that about you guys. Hey, so back up real quick. So you became a franchisee. First of all, congrats on getting Peggy, and you got the Panda founders as your partners. Like that doesn't hurt.
Great.
smart. Andrew,
That's credit to David. They had started investing in real estate with him in the mid 2000s, and Andrew and Peggy loved real estate, so they took a chance on us, and ultimately became limited partners in our restaurant company at a less than 10% type of threshold.
But he spoke at one of our YPO events last year, and he was just unbelievably generous and kind and open and transparent. It was, I mean, I'll never forget that exchange. It was,
he has certainly been sort of an idol and mentor for me in the operating business, as much as we might have helped, find some good real estate opportunities for him. I've always sort of used his company and the way that he treats people and treats his employees, and sets up his business as a way to set up our operating company. In fact, another thing that we can take some credit for involvement in, and specifically give this one again to David, is he pushed Taco Bell early in the foundation to do roundup in the restaurants, and that came from Andrew and Peggy, because they were doing roundup and generating a lot of money for children's hospitals and in Los Angeles and children's needs all over the world, and they were really outshining Taco Bell from a foundation standpoint in terms of generating funds at that time frame, with half the size of the units, right? And it was mainly because of that roundup opportunity and the customers wanting to be involved in helping as well. So Taco Bell leaned in. They ultimately did that, and the foundation has it's been transformative in what they can do to help all of the Live Moss Foundation students and people throughout the country. So yeah, we've been active in again trying to do things that make not only the brand better but the business better. The industry more aware of being good stewards of the business. And when I meet franchisees throughout the country, there are just a lot of really great stewards of the industry.
Well, explain what Roundup is.
So Roundup, your checks, $10.50. You want to round it up to an even number, $11, with that delta as a consumer going to whatever the foundation needs is. In this case, it's the Live Moss Taco Bell Foundation, which goes to help students in need, whether it's through education or other young initiatives. And you'll find that it's something that the team members, when they engage, they take a lot of pride in it, because the team members get a lot of pride out of raising money for causes. And then the consumers, when they find out what the cause is for, are not all of them, but typically they're happy to round up. And it's pretty seamless to do.
What a great idea. Nobody wants change anyway, so you may as well round up. It's going to cause. What else did you learn from Andrew and Peggy? Like, what other kind of gifts? Like, why do you think that they're so successful with Panda?
I mean, they're relentless on taking care of their teams, right? They, and they're relentless at making sure their consumer is having a good experience, right? And it's not uncommon to drive into a restaurant with Andrew and see him, get in the back of the kitchen and start to show team members, the best way to cook or waft the food, or, see him help somebody whose car might be having trouble out in the parking lot. I mean, they're just the ultimate, stewards of humans, and they think about people first. And they think about their product, and they think about their experience. And I mean, orange chicken is, it's revolutionary. So, that's another part of why they're so successful. Just they have a recognizable, craveable, revolutionary products that, consumers love. And so they just do a really good job.
But the theme is, I mean, everything that you answered about him had to do with him giving back and him treating people well. That's also what you said earlier about your success with Taco Bell, is like, you're not only thinking about how you guys win, but how they win too. Like it's just
yeah. And I find that with a lot of folks in the franchise business that I get to spend time with, whether it's in the Taco Bell community or the Inspire community or others, there's a lot of really good operators who are always thinking people first. I think where we differentiate is sort of more of the experiential, sort of push the boundaries a little bit. Like, how do we know that the four wall operating procedures are these, and we need to be consistent with all of those, but there's time and place to elevate experience. And we try to do that. And we try to do things that are going to help not only, Taco Bell, the brand, or Yum as a company, but more importantly, the franchise system, because they have brought us in and helped us become quality operators. And it's always been symbiotic, and everybody is trying to kind of grow the business together.
Nice.
Yeah.
And let's go back to the 340 units. So how did that, we sort of jumped past all that, but like you started off buying a batch of restaurants first, right? You didn't build Taco Bell and then domino it into.
Right. No, we've had a very sort of accelerated path to, I think we're at 360 now, including the Arby's restaurants. But, we bought our first wholly owned business from a group called Dolan Foster in the Bay Area. It was 75 units, followed by 13 from Offson in the Bay Area. So we started with 85 units, sort of day one. We were fortunate to have a couple of years of kind of learning with the CNR Taco folks down in LA. And then the franchisee stayed on board with us in Dolan Foster. His name was Randy Rodriguez. Great franchisee. He had started on the line in the Bay Area in a restaurant and ended up buying out the original owner, Dolan Foster, with his partner, Rich Lowe. And it's just like one of those, you always hear these really amazing success stories, and he sold 75 units, him and two partners. And so he stayed on, helped us learn the business. And from there, we acquired the restaurants in Nevada. And so we have acquired, I would say, about 70% of our restaurants that we own. We've built about 30% of them. And, our philosophy has been, where can we buy, the majority of the markets? So where can we own and control, a large portion of the trade area from our own standpoint, so that we're not sort of competing with ourselves or with our fellow franchisees as much. We're able to make more nimble decisions. In Nevada, we owned all but 3 locations. We're the largest franchisee in the Bay Area by double. We have 80 units in Kansas City, so there's really nobody else there except on the periphery. Bought that from a longtime franchisee named Paul Hoover, who was an amazing guy. And then, and most recently in Los Angeles, we've bought 3 sort of retiring franchisees, Jim DeBoard, Ray Hawk, and Bob St. John, all long-time, really great Taco Bell operators that built great businesses, each with about 25 to 40 units, and have accumulated 100 units in Southern California post-COVID and kind of pre-legislation California. So we've had this philosophy of having scale is important. Having scale in areas where operations are maybe a little bit more challenging with potential regulations is very important. But that, places like Los Angeles, places like the Bay Area, places like Nevada are long-term resilience. There's still lots of people there, and there's lots of business to be done.
And like one thing I wanted to ask you too about California, like dispel or confirm the myth, like how hard is it in California to operate a fast food concept, a fast food franchise?
It's harder than in not California. I mean, it's harder for sure. I mean,
is it worth it though? I mean, the offset with the density and, I mean,
well,
is it?
I would say yes, it's worth it. We wouldn't be doing it, but it's not worth it. We will, and are expanding in California. We just opened an awesome restaurant in downtown Los Angeles. Is another Taco Bell Cantina that is doing just amazing numbers. but yeah, it's a very good business for us in California. We have strong AUVs. We have a strong brand. Taco Bell was born in Downey, California. Our restaurant's sort of, that's the epicenter where we surround them. We have these great assets like the Pacifica Beach location up in the Bay Area that drives a lot of enthusiasm around Taco Bell. So, folks in California, just they love Taco Bell as their own, right? There's obviously a lot of competitors in the Mexican food space in California too, right? But as it becomes more difficult, unfortunately the restaurants without scale or the restaurants with lower AUVs are the ones that unfortunately take the brunt of most of those issues. And so we've managed to really, not only get through it, but thrive in it. And the teams are just really solid.
So in spite of everything people hear about California, in spite of everything, it's still worth it as long as you got the right concept with the right numbers.
Yeah. I mean, historically when I built JP Morgan Chase, it was Los Angeles was their number one expansion location in the United States, and that was because, the amount of income and money flowing through with the number of people there, even if it's sort of net negative growth, it's still a lot of economic impact. And that's not going to change. And so I think that in California, where you're having challenges, I think they're not going to get easier anytime soon, but over time they will balance out. And so I think if you're in it for the long haul, you should be pretty good.
Yeah. No, we're partners in restaurants in California. They do great. In spite of it, but I think you hear so much chatter and then people talking about the chatter that they don't actually know. But you might be right. It might be the people that have startups, low volume, like those don't work anywhere. But
no, well, listen, we're not without challenges. I mean, we have as many, lawsuits as the next guy in California because it's easier to file a lawsuit, right? Or it's easier to do these sorts of things that may not be, justifiable, but there's a path for somebody to come at us. But that's made us better. Has made us better operators. We spend a lot of time understanding how and what you're supposed to do within each county, each city. And we're not bulletproof, but we do things and we train our employees and they know their rights. And, we take care of all of the regulations that you can imagine. We have dedicated folks, helping people understand what that is. It costs you more money because of that to operate in California, but you just got to look at is the juice worth the squeeze? Can you absorb that? And how do you grow that top line? How do you kind of continue to grow, and how do you grow opportunities for your team so that they're there with you as long as they have been?
Yeah. What about one thing I wonder, just because is you're buying batches of restaurants, let's say Missouri, or I think you have some in Alaska or something crazy like that. But as you're buying someone's business clear across the country, how do you protect against, you're buying something that guy ran every day. He had a team, they had, a relationship, and then all of a sudden you buy it. I worry, how do you keep that from falling off a cliff or from good people leaving or numbers diving? What do you guys do to make sure that whatever you're buying really remains what it's worth, what you bought it for?
Well, I've learned a lot over the years with acquisitions, and we've been really good at buying acquisitions and competing for acquisitions and convincing sellers we're the right folks. I think most of the time you're finding sellers, maybe not necessarily full private equity seller, but most likely because they built some really good teams as well. But the guys who have built their businesses over, 40 years are really emotionally attached to what they're selling. Right. And they are picking, people are kind of in the same ballpark of dollars that they're willing to pay. So it's really up to them to who they want to continue their legacy and who they want. Every one of those folks that have worked for them, most of the times these general managers have worked for them for 15, 20 years, and they work directly for them. Like with me, I might not know every single one of my general managers. I know a lot of them, but I might not know every one of them. But they knew every one of them, and they kind of raised them. So they spend a lot. You get a lot of you get vetted quite a bit. Like, why do you deserve to, have sort of lead my family here at this point? And what we have done is we're first of all, well, who within the family that you have now can help us run the business? Like, who are the leaders that you have today that we can help and coach to be even bigger leaders? And we have made a very specific, mandate that we don't make any changes and new acquisitions for several months. Like, listen, these restaurants are making a P&L. The restaurant managers know how to run it. We don't need to go in the next day after buying something and say, you've got to use our management system, or you have to, take X amount of hours out of the labor table because you're running a higher percentage than our average, or you got to raise prices, or you got to do all this. We've done that like in some of the early days because it's there. You can see there's opportunity in the P&L, but when you do it too fast is when you start to lose the people, when you start to lose the people that have been doing it a long time, because you don't bring them along in the change in the journey of change. You don't show them how it's going to help them ultimately, save time, save energy, and make more money. And so it's not about telling them what to do, but kind of showing them and letting them help make the decision when to make those changes. And so that's how I think we've had some success. I actually, Mike Culp, Mike, KBP, he runs 800 or 900 KFCs. I had told him a story about having a challenge with one of my acquisitions. And, I was having some discussions with my leadership team about time for changes. And he said, I don't make any changes for 6 months. I mean, we make sure that, we understand what we have, and we bring people along before we start to make those changes. And so that's what we've done, and it's proven to be, successful. And we've had a very high retention rate of those senior leaders and managers that were at these companies when we bought them. So that's been kind of one of the secrets is to go slow on your get. Everybody wants to go get it right away, and it's there, but you can create yourself more problems than it's worth if you go too fast.
Yeah. Well, and you learn that lesson, right? Because your first instinct's to cut where you can cut. And then you realize that actually has consequences. And maybe I should be a little more tactful and strategic about how we're doing this, and bring your managers along for that ride. Like,
yeah. And it's about having, it is really like, it's really about having the right purpose in your business too. And a lot, we overlook that as entrepreneurs sometimes, particularly if it's a couple of us and we want to like, hey, let's build a business and let's be the biggest at the business and have these sort of like hairy goals. But the reality is you can't get there without engagement from an entire team and network of people. And they don't really get engaged fully through the system until they all believe in what you're doing. Like our purpose is to positively impact the lives of the team and the communities that we serve, and that's it. Like, so how do we get everybody to say what we're doing every day is somehow providing an affordable, healthy, craveable meal to somebody, or it's providing a great job to somebody, or somebody's getting to go to school on our scholarship program. And everybody that's doing everything within our system believes that we are building a business that's and helping, each other and helping each other grow. And so being purpose driven, a lot of people have talked about it, but it's essential to building a large, scalable company.
Yeah. Think about how much smarter you are today than when you first started as a franchise, like before you had a franchise thinking about buying those Taco Bells. How much smarter you are today. Is there anything about 2025 that makes you think you couldn't do this all over again? Is there anything tougher about today? I mean, I know it's a different environment, but is there any reason that you couldn't do what you did today?
Like starting today?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, one of the questions you had asked me before was like, could you do it faster, or could you do it, better, and it's like that, 70s ooh la la song, if I knew, if I only knew what I knew today, kind of thing. And I think that the thing that I thought about was like, you could do it. There's just no shortcuts, anything that's sort of worth doing takes time, and you just have to put the time in. You have to have the purpose around it, the plan. There's no get rich kind of quick in this particular business. This is a long-term investment of your time and your resources to create value, for not only yourself, but for others, within your business or, outside of your business. So I think that it can absolutely be done today. It just has to be purpose driven. You have to have a plan. You have to trust the process and not try to do it quick,
That's the magic right there for anyone listening to it. It's like, because so many people, when they start a business, the mission is to generate profit, maximize profit, right? And it's like, you're saying that you'll get there, but you'll get there by not necessarily focusing on profit, but focusing on doing good things for other people.
Focusing on the process. I mean, what is it? Nick Saban, right? He's the big process guy. It's not, don't focus on the SEC championship or, the national championship. He's like a focus on this drill. Can you do this particular drill better than anybody else? And can you perfect this drill that turns into perfecting, the next play that turns into meeting your plan, whatever that plan might be. But, not focusing on the results and focusing on, once you have that strategy and plan, focusing on the process. I think that he's, obviously, proven that to be a successful way to, run an organization.
Yeah. Couple more questions. So how do people get capital to do what you're doing? Like to start off buying a batch, maybe it's not 85, but whatever it is, like where are the options for someone who wants to do this to go get capital? There's obviously debt for a portion of it, but then you're going to need
the debt's out there for good businesses, right? I mean, there's some really amazing franchise finance partners that, we couldn't have built our company without the folks at like Citizens and B of A and Fifth Third. Took a lot of, they took some chances on us early because we had some really unique real estate, strategies, particularly when we bought that Nevada market. When we bought it, it was running at 14% rent factors. And this was due to this, mid 2000s skyrocketing in rents and cost. And it really kind of hamstrung on the previous franchisee. But because of our real estate background, we had a strategy to sort of try to solve that over time and underwrote it. And that with that strategy in mind, we actually pro forma that the EBITDA would go backwards. We said, okay, banks, we want to buy this and we want you guys to give us this much money. And by the way, our earnings are going to go negative and go backwards for the first 2 years, but trust us, it's going to go up. And we're not borrowing 6 times leverage. We're only borrowing like, 5 or so. So we're going to put a bunch of equity into this as well. And it turns out we didn't go backwards. And in fact, we doubled that position within a couple of years. And it's probably 5x since maybe 6 since we bought it. But they were good partners when they understood the strategy, when you showed them the plan and the strategy, and you had proven some of the process. And so the banks are out there. I think there's the way we are capitalized is through just private, friends and family. And we have been able to fortunately put together, good size equity checks amongst our current equity group. David built a great network through his real estate group, and over 20 years, we tapped in, some of that as we started the franchise business. And then success breeds success, and their friends tell their other friends that they've done really, nice or well, and we've met their expectations in a lot of ways. And people are kind of always asking, and how do I get into that? So, we raise money, we put our own money in, we put a lot of our own cash in, and so that's been a key too, is they understand that we have money at risk as well as them. But when you're starting early, you may not have as much. I mean, I didn't have as much to put in. So, you just kind of sweat it out and you try to put a good deal together and try to find the right partners.
Yeah. And the opposite is true too. If you don't do a good job with your investors, they're not going to keep reinvesting. They're not going to refer people to you, and it's going to be tougher. So when you're starting, like, that's so important to have a good reputation for delivering on what you said you were going to do. You will get more because there's so much money out there looking for places to go. They just don't want to make a mistake. Right. So what about out of your 360 or so restaurants, do you own all the property? Is there an argument for owning it all or not owning some?
Yeah, no, we don't own a lot of our operating properties. I think it's probably less than 10%, maybe 20 properties or so. And that's a function of we've kind of bought them. There were some of the early ones we bought because the cap rates were a little higher back then. But, for us, the way we underwrite and look at our operating company, the value of the real estate when they're being sold at the time of the business is usually, double or 2.5 times the value of the business. So it's sort of diluting your returns, and we're a cash flow based business. We like to take smaller increments of cash flow over time, as opposed to, not taking any cash flow and then recapping big checks over time. So we kind of are more of a slower cash flow type business. We reinvest a lot. So putting a lot of money up front into the real estate properties that might be being sold take away quite a bit of that cash flow, and they're not accretive to sort of our investment profile there. Now we go out and buy real estate, deals elsewhere under a different, kind of portfolio management that's more meeting a different type of need. But in this business, if you're out for like cash flow and growth, it doesn't seem like the real estate is accretive to that in the short term. If you're a family, if this is going to be, I think family offices and owning that real estate for generations, eventually that, if you're buying a 5 cap and that's 20 years of EBITDA, eventually that is making a lot of sense for you. So, and there's pretty good cash flow, so you may not need it. So, there's always an argument both ways. It just depends on how you're underwriting your deal.
Yeah. Let me ask you about this. So in California, they enacted a fast food council, and you got on that council, which seems amazing. But can you give, just so I don't get any of it wrong, can you give the backstory of how that whole thing happened? It could have been a lot worse, but like how that whole thing happened and your role on it. And then I got a question. These guys from NRA asked me to ask you some questions.
Okay. Fast food council. I don't know if it could have been worse. I have no idea. I wasn't in the room when that deal was being negotiated. There was AB 257 that got passed by the governor's office a few years ago, and then the coalition, sort of the small business coalition, which is a group of, franchise operators and others, put a referendum together to say, hey, this isn't going to work. This is going to be detrimental to the business model. And that referendum got the signatures it needed within a month to put it on the ballot. And the ballot, became sort of a political battle of the governor's office not necessarily wanting it to go to a ballot initiative to the voters, and the industry kind of trying to make a better deal. And so they ended up making a deal called AB 1228, which took some joint employer and some other issues off the table that I think were good for some of them at the time. But it really stuck the businesses, the small businesses and the operators with this $20 minimum wage, which was essentially about a 25% increase in wage across the board overnight. March 31st, you're paying, $16.50 an hour, and you're paying you're $16 an hour, and you're paying $20, April 1. And so that's a big. And any business, when you take 25% labor increase overnight, it's a big shock. And so they added that. They formed this fast food council that would further govern additional increases over time, on what they should or shouldn't be, and also other things like workplace safety or things that could be difficult if they're done in the wrong way, like know your rights training and things of that nature. And so predictive scheduling. And so I was, I've got almost 200 units in the state of California. So pretty directly impacted, and thought that I can't not be in the room when these things are being done. I had donated quite a bit of money to this coalition, and wasn't at the seat when this thing was being negotiated. So was able to get one of a couple of appointments from the governor on the business side of things. And the purpose really is to make sure that, we're doing these things responsibly, and that we're telling the real stories about these businesses, like all the good stories that are happening in every one of our restaurants, from general managers buying their first homes, their first cars, or people going into college, and the types of opportunities that these jobs provide people with, and the types, to there's a lot of negative that people will talk about our industry that just, it's kind of 1% of the story. And when you look at the labor statistics and the complaints in the state of California, it was like 1.5% of them came from the fast food industry. But yeah, we were dealing with the bulk of this. So for me, it was really about wanting to talk to the communities and the legislators about what these businesses really provide, and to make sure that we're in the room when these things are being discussed, so that so that we understand some ramifications. Now, there's been 2 studies just recently posted, one by the Berkeley Institute, and another by the University of Santa Cruz Institution for Social Transformation. Can't believe I remembered that off the top of my head. But those 2 studies really study the year-long effect and impact of these issues, and what they're having on consumer, which isn't necessarily good with wages being raised, what they're having on employees with maybe reduced hours, or some restaurants having to close. So I would recommend people read those 2 articles to understand the real impact of what's happening here. And it's not good. So we need to just be thoughtful and careful about what we do going forward.
Yeah, I love Santa Cruz, so it doesn't surprise me that they have a study on soulful transformation.
Social transformation. I was a little nervous when I saw, who was doing it, because you never know what slants folks are going to take. But this is pretty, it's all informed with data, and it's pretty informative. So, yeah, I mean, that's a big lift, and I think it's going back to helping the industry, and really, one of the things I would tell folks that are getting into the business today, whether it's in California or anywhere, is you have to make a decision that you're going to come into operating a business, but you're also, part of doing that is being a steward of the industry, operating the business as well, but also spending time in talking to state legislators or folk lawmakers that are making laws, for them to understand what these businesses do and how they provide a benefit to their communities, and they're not just hearing one side of the story, and also that they're contributing and promoting the potential council or state legislative members that should be elected. And so one of the things I don't think we've done well as an industry is being involved in who is making decisions for us at the legislative level. And that's just because we've always been busy running restaurants. It's not, nobody has time to do that, but it's unfortunately now a line item in our P&L that either we as owners or we have to hire folks to represent us to make sure that those efforts are being made.
Well, let me segue to the NRA's questions for you. So he said the first question is, we're coming up on a year since the wages went up to $20. What was the impact? How did you guys deal with it? Were you able to take price, or did it all come out of the P&L?
Some of it came out of the P&L. I mean, some of it came through pricing, not as much as you would have thought or liked. What we did, just speaking for us and not the industry, is that we started to look at the impacts, 9 months before they were going to happen, and make adjustments and changes. And what you'll find out is, these operators and folks that run restaurants, when they have to figure out ways to make, the restaurant run well and make the P&Ls work, they can really exceed and elevate, where they are. And I think we've looked at different ways on how labor is deployed, times of day that they're deployed. We have done things with adding a lot of kiosks, right? So the technology that Taco Bell put out has helped, and so a lot of labor efficiency. Again, running some shoulder hours that weren't really that were maybe barely profitable, or maybe not even profitable at pre legislation. You kind of unfortunately have to take those away because they become a negative impact to what you're able to do and what you're able to pay people. So it's just making a lot of adjustments. And so I can't say that, we have the answer, but we've been able to survive it. I don't think that additional, we're in a position where, we can start to absorb additional wage increase and additional impacts. I think one of the things you saw in California in the last ballot is the constituents, the state, the people did not pass the statewide minimum wage mandate to go up to $18.50. So you can tell that folks are getting a little, fatigued with rising costs.
Well, that was actually his second point. He said California voters just rejected Prop 32, a statewide minimum wage increase, recognizing the Fast Food Council has the authority to implement additional wage increase. What message do you think Prop 32's failure should send to the Fast Food Council, if any? Just that they're fatigued and
I think, the only one I could speak for is myself. And it sends me a message that the states are fatigued on the rising costs of goods, across the board. I think this sectoral wage efforts, like taking one industry and making it do something, compounds and fractures, the business, because not everybody's getting the same wage, and some folks are taking price, but not everybody gets to have an extra 25% to pay for that additional price. So, in my opinion, the only way to do it right is to do it statewide, but the voters are saying we're not ready for that.
Yeah,
that's what I'm hearing.
Well, and this was Mike Watley, one of my favorites at NRA. So his last one was, will the Fast Food Council be considering any new policies in 25?
So in 25, the thing that's consistently on the board is whether to raise wage additionally up to 3.5%, or the cost of living, right? And so that's something that's continuing to be discussed. I don't think personally that we're ready to make a recommendation on that, because we just haven't had enough data, to go through a full cycle to see what the impact is. I still think our delta and variation from what the minimum wage is statewide is too wide. So we would just be further widening it. And so I don't know. That has to be agendized. It hasn't been. In fact, there's a meeting today, a subcommittee meeting that I'm not on, that we could potentially hear about after this, that is going onto an agenda. They're talking about other things like predictive scheduling, know your rights training to be done by third parties off campus, which are things that are being discussed that cause some a lot of consternation for a lot of folks. So for us, I think as operators and owners, it's to sort of try to discern the things that are being talked about and give real life examples as to why those things, what type of impact they're really going to have, not only on the business, but more importantly on the employee and the consumer.
Yeah. And it's maybe going down a rabbit hole, but I'm not sure statewide. I never understood why statewide made sense, because $20 to an employee downtown San Francisco is one thing. $20 to a guy in the middle of nowhere, Death Valley, that's different. So I don't disagree with that. I think when I talk about statewide, it's more industry agnostic, right? Like, these things should not say that this type of industry should have this minimum wage and that type of industry should have that minimum wage. So I see. Okay.
that's sort of the piece I was thinking.
No, this has been great, man. I appreciate it. We're coming up on our hour, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, and appreciate your willingness to share.
I'm
So,
totally. I'm happy to do so. I think one of the things we didn't touch on that I wanted to mention was this new brand we were involved with called Live Moss Cafe, and we did that in partnership with Taco Bell. It's this Mexican-inspired specialty, coffee and beverage platform. We opened up our first restaurant in Chula Vista inside of a Taco Bell, so it's kind of a sub brand. And if you were to go there, it's kind of a shop within a shop. And I was tapped by Sean and Taco Bell to help them develop this concept. I had been working on a specialty coffee concept of my own, thinking in my head. I had spent a lot of time in Mexico City recently. I've got some heritage and background in the Southwest, and generations ago back to Zacatecas, Mexico, and so coffee and specialty coffee has been sort of in my blood. And I was able to work with this really great branding agent called the Family Vibe and David Zimmerman to bring this Live Moss Cafe to life inside the four walls of Taco Bell. And we're just on the verge of our first restaurant. And Liz Matthews, this great food innovator at Taco Bell, created this really great product. We're seeing amazing results. And we're, starting to build out our rollout potential, which, goes back to my original days at CVS and JP Morgan and stuff. To be able to roll out a brand new brand from scratch within this brand is something I'm super excited about, and I would have been remiss if I didn't get to share that with you.
what's the plan with it? Like, you created one in Chula Vista, which is awesome because you couldn't get closer to the border of Mexico.
Right.
So what's the big idea with this?
The big idea really is, how do you create additional sales layers within the four walls of the restaurant? And when Sean originally talked about it, we were actually with the Super Bowl in 2024, and we saw some beverage machines that Pepsi had, and we're like, why can't we elevate what we're doing inside of Taco Bell's? And I said, well, funny you ask. I've been working on this concept, specialty Mexican coffee beverages, and there's no better place to bring that to life than Taco Bell, that has inspired, has this Mexican inspired menu. And it wasn't about, getting an additional 10% out of a restaurant. It's like, how do we get an additional, 20, 25, 50% out of restaurants? And how do we look at those day parts like AM breakfast, happy hour, where we're maybe not as, not the dominant player, but we have this space and we have employees there. How do we activate those? So that was really the goal, is that how do you bring in more layers and more business layers into the business? What we found out was we brought a lot of excitement in the restaurant. We have these Bell Ristas that work in the restaurants, and they're in purple aprons, and they're like, they're making these amazing beverages, and we kind of saw that this was more of a movement, not just a message. It wasn't just like, hey, now we have Mexican specialty coffee beverages. No, now you come in here and you've got a customer experience that you're experiencing within a restaurant that you may not have been used to, and maybe COVID has changed the way people have used QSR, and they're not in the dining rooms as much. Well, we brought a little bit of life back into that, and the team members are super excited. So it's been something that's starting to take a little bit of life of its own. And I believe there's a few layers to it where we can expand, obviously, the Live Moss Cafe within the restaurant, potential for standalone Live Moss cafes. And then the product in and of itself, as it gains traction, has the ability to go in every restaurant in the country. And that's where it goes back to, Dan, like, how do we get to be a part of making brands better? All of this is going to lift our boat in our restaurants, but it also lifts, the Taco Bell boat, and gives opportunities to all of our fellow franchisees to expand on. So it's one restaurant. It's a pilot. It's something that I think there's a lot of excitement around the results. And so we're starting to plan building some more in Southern California, and hopefully get it to a point where a few years down the road, you'll hear about it. You'll be like, I know the guy who helped create that brand.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Like when you tell me, it's a good idea for a couple of reasons. Like I love Taco Bell, but I couldn't go every day. But I do go to a coffee place every day, right? So you're going to wind up creating more consistent, and the world needs something different than Starbucks anyways, which is why you see Dutch Bros and all these other guys starting to pop. So, and then you're doing something that's authentic, more of an authentic edge, Mexican-y coffee, which is cool because it kind of helps the Taco Bell brand. Like the Taco Bell, to me, I grew up in Orange County and it's more California Mexican. I love it, but it's, now
it's Mexican inspired, right?
Yeah. And
but
so
you're nailing it. You're totally nailing the message.
Yeah, no, it's, and then the fact that they let you do it, and that there's probably a handful of franchisees that, because you guys are additive to the ecosystem, you're not just trying to suck out everything you can. You're trying to be good stewards of the brand. You get to try stuff like this.
You get to try stuff, and you're right. It's like what you saw. You obviously see what happened with Starbucks, and Brian's going to do a great job bringing that company back. I'm sure it's a big ship to him, but he's done it before and he'll do it again. But you see what Dutch is expanding. You see what the guys at Seven Brews. Ron created like a little cult there, and he's got a great system and employees and all that thing. But when I looked at doing some of those sort of in the Southwest, my concern was differentiation in the coffee space, right? And living in Southern California and San Diego, or going to Mexico quite a bit, you started to see these places like La Menorca, which is this great bakery, Mexican-inspired coffee shop that has about a dozen locations in LA, or Hola Adios, which they have these elevated brands of specialty coffee, right? And we're like, well, how do we take that and scale it, in a way that is repeatable and differentiated? And we called it the Taylor Montgomery and David Zimmerman came up with be authentically Taco Bell, but radically different, but authentically Taco Bell. Like it's different.
It's a good idea because it's going to get people coming to Taco Bell more often. It's going to, now you guys have the snack day part, not only more stuff for the morning, but in the afternoon and all that. So it's good, man. That's awesome. So thanks for sharing.
It goes back to that marketing fundamental of like internal purpose drives external promise, right? Like what is our purpose? Our purpose was to sort of inspire our teams and our restaurant and take this specialty coffee and breathe life back into the dining rooms, into the experience of what we do as operators. And then and then the next thing you know, the customer is getting this great greeting, they're getting this great product in this fresh environment, and they're just happy to be there. And so it's really something I've gotten a lot of passion about. And you have these different careers over your different things that you do over your career, and they change. And I'm just excited that you get to like keep building them. And that's one of the message I give back to some of your viewers is like, never kind of lose what you've learned. And you might not be using your retail rollout, expertise that you had, 2 decades ago, or you might not be using your engineering that you did or your design model. But then it came back around 15 years later where I'm using all those things and what I've learned in operating businesses to help create a brand, a subset of a brand. And so you just got to always have those things, ready to go when you need them.
Man, you were the man. I appreciate it. This is better than I knew it was going to be good. This is better than I thought it was going to be. So I appreciate it. Where can people find you? Do you guys have your own sort of franchisee website, or how do people?
Yeah, we have drgfood.com. I think I'm on there. I think, LinkedIn. You can find me. I'm not hard to find. I'm not on the most wanted list, so that's good. But my phone is not public, but you can find it.
You're one of the good ones. So thank you very much. Audience, if you like this, you know the drill, like and share it, and we will see you soon.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm your host, Dan Rowe. If you enjoyed today's episode, this podcast is only going to get better. Please like, comment, and subscribe to hear more from the most successful franchisors and franchisees, and we'll see you next time.